Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Gini Dietrich.
And I'm here today, Gini, to talk about the fact that I've got some issues with your work on this podcast. It's not quite up to snuff.
Great. Can't wait. Awesome.
We'll talk about that right after this.
Woohoo!
So actually, I lied. I don't have any issues with your work on this podcast.
Or lack thereof, actually.
Well, I mean,
some days, some weeks I do
days,
better.
Some days we do it at the scheduled time. Some days we have to change it just to accommodate Diva Gini Dietrich. But,
yeah,
it is what it is. Mm-hmm. But no, today we're going to be talking about something from our favorite website, Reddit.
And by favorite, we mean Chip's favorite website, which he sends me links to and says, go check this out because Reddit scares me. So then I very carefully click on the link and I'm like, okay, this isn't bad. And then I read. And then I very quickly get off the site.
Well, here's the thing about Reddit. There are often good questions. There's sometimes good answers. And there's often lots of entertainment to be had.
So much entertainment. Yes.
From it. So I send it to you with a mix of those things. And so I sent you one of those recently because it is a source for some good topics about agency issues, small business issues generally. And this is one that was in the small business subreddit on Reddit. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I do have to read a little bit of it because it's too funny in some places.
It is pretty entertaining.
Not to. And so this is a business owner who is posting, not as far as I know, an agency owner, but the themes will still resonate, I think, with many of our listeners. And so this is someone who says he's not sure it's worth hiring more help just to make more errors because he's had to correct so many recent mistakes. He says employees are not learning from their mistakes. He says, I've been in business for 14 years and it's getting ridiculous. And I think one of the things that in particular it seemed that set him off was he says, today's icing on the cake, our $400 per hour outside lawyer made multiple typos in a court filing and forgot to add an attachment. So we can't help you with the lawyers.
No.
That's a whole nother topic and probably for someone else to dive into how you actually get lawyers to do what you want them to do. Some do. Many kind of do their own thing anyway. But employees, now that's something that we know something about, and we're happy to talk about it because many agency owners have been here. They've said, oh my God, the team is just letting me down. I feel like it's just mistake after mistake. And so how do you solve that, Gini?
There was one answer in there, and you're right, it is highly entertaining. It's kind of like Nextdoor for me. I use Nextdoor as my reality television because it's so entertaining because people are crazy. But same thing with this.
Do not get me started on Nextdoor.
I freaking love it.
Or Facebook community pages.
I don't have the Facebook community.
Oh, that is a stellar one for
people
my,
are special.
for my
They're
town.
special. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It is really disturbing to know who lives next door, so to speak.
So I was reading through it this morning, and one of the comments I thought was really interesting, and it struck home to me, which was sort of, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me, but it pretty much was, listen, if you don't have a process and you don't have that process written down and it isn't part of the onboarding and consistent training, that's your own stupid fault. And so if you say to somebody, you made a mistake, let's correct it, here's the process, then the next time it happens, that's their fault. But if you say to somebody, you made a mistake, here's what happened, go fix it, but there's no process or you don't work them through, the repetitive things that can be done over and over again, that's your fault. And I think they use the word punitive, which I kind of like. But I've been there. Where I'm like, I just don't understand why somebody can't write a stupid news release without typos. I've been there. And it wasn't until I figured out that I had to have process and there had to be a set way of doing things that the mistakes started to go away.
Yeah, I mean, processes are fundamentally the biggest answer to this. It's not the only answer, but it solves a lot of these problems, or at least routes them to better places. I think to me, that my personal favorite answer was the nitwits who wanted to dock their pay and send them home.
Right. No, now to be fair, it was 4 times. The first time you got a talking to. The second time was the door closed talking to. The third time was you got sent home without pay, and the fourth time you got fired.
Yeah. Okay, maybe there are some industries where that flies.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Certainly in the agency world, don't do that.
No.
Don't.
You can't do that. It's illegal to do that. You cannot do that.
There's the legal stuff, but even if you were doing it, with pay so that you didn't violate the law, don't send people home. They may act like children, but employees are not children. You don't send them to their rooms or their office or their cubicle
or to the principal's office.
I mean, no. Yeah. Like, pretend that you're peers here, right? This is not, no, don't do that. But so process is part of the answer, but I think, fundamentally, I think that you have to look in the mirror as you're complaining about your team. Who hired that team?
Yep.
Who trained that team?
Yep.
Who manages that team?
Yep.
Right? So if you've got a problem with your team, start with yourself. Right? It's the same thing I say to agency owners when they're trying to figure out how to take their agency to the next level, or how to scale, how to grow. Look at yourself first. Mm-hmm. You gotta get yourself right and make changes to the way you're doing things before you can propagate that out to your employees, to your clients, to the marketplace.
Yep.
And particularly when you've got a performance problem that's not limited to one employee, that apparently is expansive and involves multiple employees making multiple mistakes and the same mistakes over and over again, there's something wrong in the way that you are running things.
Yes.
In some fashion. And
yes.
so you need to get to the root cause before you can truly solve it. But some of the things that certainly do help are processes.
Sure.
Right? It's feedback.
Yep.
I preach. In fact, I've got one client who loves to start almost every coaching call I have with, "Hey, I had my one-on-ones last week." Because I'm a broken record on one-on-ones and always having them, right? So you need to have processes. You need to have communication. You need to have feedback so that when someone makes a mistake, they understand it. Right? One of the problems that a lot of us have is we just fix the mistakes and move on.
Right.
And you have to view it as a training and teaching opportunity. So there's a lot of things that you can do. And so we'll talk more about that here in the minutes ahead. But start by looking in the mirror. If you're complaining about your whole team and not one individual team member, the biggest problem probably lies with you and your management team.
100%. And like I said, that was a very hard lesson for me to learn. Very expensive lesson.
Absolutely.
Burn lots of bridges. Yeah.
And we've talked previously about how your employees are never going to care as much as you do.
Right.
They're never going to be as good as you do. But this goes beyond that, right? This is just straight up making mistakes, missing deadlines, doing the wrong kind of work. That's beyond just being, not as good as. That is a fundamental problem that does have to be addressed. But again, you've got to figure out what it is that's creating the atmosphere where this is happening. Do you have the wrong people in the wrong seats on the bus? Do you not have the processes?
Right.
Do you not have the training? What is it that's leading to this?
So there was a Reagan report, I want to say probably about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago. And it asked 1,500 communicators. So granted, not all agency owners, but PR people, professionals, what types of project management software they use, and less than 20% said they use it at all. And I was like, what? That's a problem, especially when you're thinking about working with a team and providing feedback and giving them the opportunity to succeed and having one-on-ones and all of those things. You have to have some sort of ability to manage projects. And I think that was a tough one for me too, because I was always like, well, I don't need it. Like, tell me what I need to do and I'll get it done. Like, I'm the one leading the organization. I will get my work done, right? But it's the fact that there are so many agency owners that are not using some sort of project management system just from a process perspective is shocking to me. So when you think about it, and let's make the assumption that you've trained appropriate, or you've hired appropriately, and you do have the right people on the in the seats on the bus. If they're still making mistakes and you're still frustrated, it's because you're not doing the things that you should be in terms of crafting the process, making sure they understand what's expected, how to do the job, and using project management software to track it all, because you can't do it on a spreadsheet. You can't do it with Post-it note to-do lists. You can't do it. You can't even do it just by having conversations in your one-to-ones. You have to have something that has visibility for the entire organization.
Absolutely agree. And I will say I disagree with the results of that survey. I haven't seen the actual report because, unlike you, I don't do research for this show. I just kind of show up and spout off. So thanks for making me look bad by
You're welcome.
Injecting some research into our conversation and making it look like
no problem.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll have a conversation on our next one-on-one about
Thanks.
that.
Great. Okay. All right. I'll look forward to that.
Yeah. So, but I disagree that only 20% are. The vast majority of the others are using a project management tool. It's just called Outlook or Gmail. And
Fair.
They don't recognize it as
a spreadsheet.
Such.
Right.
Well, probably not even a spreadsheet, but most of them, I know a lot of people who manage by their email inbox. And atrocious, not a good way to do it. Okay. but they are doing something, because there's no way that you can do it without having some sort of at least cobbled together system. It's still not as good as a proper project management tool, but they are using something to do it. It's not just all up in their heads. Too much of it may be, but in any case, so yes, using some sort of a tool where there is, and I think this is the key, there's shared visibility. And that's the problem with using something like Gmail or Outlook.
Yeah.
You don't have shared visibility, right? You've got what you have in your own inbox. And that may or may not be the full picture, and it may or may not be easily accessible to other team members above, below, or adjacent to you. So having some sort of a project management tool allows you to at least have that visibility, which is the first step. But most of them allow you to do something to formalize a process, whether that's templates when you set up new things within the project management tool. Some of them have the ability to link one task to the next so that this one comes up when this one is completed, right? There's a lot of ways that you can make it much more detail-oriented in such a way that you avoid a lot of the common mistakes that you identify. And particularly if you're seeing those common mistakes, identifying them as such and having a process to address them. Yep. Right. So if you just sit there and say, you did it wrong, do it better next time, that does nothing. Right. What is the process? So going to your point of the person who has typos in their press release, right? So that means that either they or someone else needs to actually proofread it. And
Correct.
Probably better to have someone else do it, right? It's very difficult to proofread your own work. Because I know when I look at my own stuff, I see what should be there, not what actually is there.
Yep.
Right. So you come up with those processes to address the specific problems. Now, if it continues to happen time and time again, even after you've put the process in, well, now you've got a bigger problem. Now you have a performance issue and not a process issue. Right. And agency owners hate dealing with performance issues because it means you have to have difficult conversations, Ginny.
Yes. I think that's just people in general don't like to have performance conversations, but yes. So I will tell you that 4 years ago, I think it was 4 years ago, we spent a crazy amount of time, and we did it during the summer when we're typically slow, of creating videos to show how things are done. So this is how we use the blog. This is how we use social. Like, we created all these videos and we put them they're now in a Notion board where we have all of our onboarding stuff in there, so that when somebody starts, they're given everything they need, but we kind of dole it out slowly so that we're not like, here's your document, go do the work, right? Because that's just way too overwhelming. But we dole it out over 6 weeks. And it took so much time to do it. And it took all of us time to do it. And I would say we probably spent 4 or 5 months getting it all where it needed to be. But now when somebody starts, we have the process, the onboarding process. They know what's expected of them. They know how we do things. They know where to get passwords and all the information that they need to be able to do their job. And those frustrating conversations I used to have with my leadership team, we don't have those anymore. It's because we've created, and it took so much time, but it has saved us so much time years later. And it's easy to go in and make edits or change things as things progress, but we don't spend nearly that kind of time anymore on onboarding and training and everything, because it's all there. It's all on video, and it's doled out in a way that a person would do their job, so that they're like, oh, okay, this is how I should be doing this. And sure, we get some questions, and but it's significantly easier than it was before we did all of that.
Right. Well, and I think, what some of the pushback that I sometimes hear is, well, we're too small to have formal processes. We're just...
That's the best time to create it.
Absolutely. I mean, if you are a team of one, a process is still helpful.
Yes.
I can tell you this from experience, because I am not very good at setting up processes for myself.
Well, you're an entrepreneur.
It often means that little details get overlooked.
Yeah.
Say, like when I'm publishing the Agency Leadership Podcast, and I forget a step or two along the way, and then realize a week later, ooh, I didn't do that right. I need to go fix that. If I built a process and a nice little checklist, I probably wouldn't have that same problem.
Right.
So learn from my failures, my experience.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I was talking to Joe Thornley and Martin Waxman on Inside PR, and we were talking about that. And, on Inside PR, we took about a 1.5 year sabbatical, and we're just now getting back into it. And all three of us have forgotten. And we don't have it written down. We don't have our process written down, which shame on us. But all three of us are like, so how did we do that again? Because we don't have the process written down. And even though we did it every week for years, we had that 18-month break, and we literally don't know what we're supposed to do anymore.
Right. Well, and if you have a written down process, it's also something that you can review periodically and see,
Yep.
Can I improve the efficiency?
Yep.
Can I improve the quality?
Yep.
Are there things that maybe I want to add on to it, so that, I can take, with just one more step, I can magnify the benefit of this work that I'm doing.
Absolutely.
And so having that makes it so much easier to undertake those reviews, and so much quicker to undertake. So you're more likely to improve your processes if you've documented it. And the other thing is, a lot of small agency owners are struggling with how to manage their own time. One of the best ways to do that is to come up with these documented processes, because then you can spot really easily what things you can offload onto somebody else. Because, if I were to say, I want someone to help me with the Agency Leadership Podcast so I don't have to spend as much time on it. Well, okay, what specifically, right? Because obviously someone else isn't going to be sitting here in this seat having this conversation with you. Right. I mean, that would be the ultimate way, I suppose, to save myself time. But I would like to think that would take something away from this podcast.
It might, yeah. Yeah, it might do that.
I mean, I suppose you could just have a conversation with yourself. There's just like a blank half of the screen while you're talking. There are some people who would probably argue that would be an upgrade in the quality of the conversation. And if you're one of those people, please don't send me an email. I don't want to hear it.
You can send it to me, though. I'd like to hear it.
Because I would like to feel like I'm filling some role here other than just hitting the record button at the start and end, and having my beautiful segues
your
open
beautiful segues, yes.
Beautiful segues.
Yes.
Yes. But so if you've done that, then you can start to figure out, okay, here are the things that I could farm out. And you can be realistic about how much time it is that you would be saving. Because one of the problems that a lot of us have when we're trying to delegate tasks is we overestimate the benefit of delegating certain tasks. And a lot of times we find it actually doesn't save that much time to delegate it. And you actually end up spending as much time to manage it as it does to delegate it. And so ideally, you want to find ones that are not that way, right? So if you're looking at your tasks and you can offload those things that are the biggest time benefit, that are the easiest to offload, you will be much better at becoming a good delegator than if you try to bite off the ones that you're going to sit there and say, oh my God, this takes me just as long to do it.
Yeah. And
I've tried to outsource the writing the summary of this episode. I had last year my summer intern do it. It frankly took me more time to edit it than it took me to actually, write a couple of paragraphs. that's not a knock on him. He doesn't know what he's writing about.
Right.
Right? He also didn't have the conversation. I like to think I can sort of kind of remember what you and I talked about when I'm writing it just a couple of weeks after the fact.
Right.
It'd be even better if I wrote it sooner, but hey, that's a whole nother story.
Yes.
And so, if you start to look at those things, you're going to improve not just your team, which is where we started this conversation, but yourself, because that is where the biggest benefit comes from. And that's fundamentally how you solve all of the performance issues in your agency, is you look inward to figure out what it is that needs to be adjusted. And ultimately, if you do get to that performance conversation because the processes haven't worked, you also have to be comfortable with, what is it, Ginny? Firing people.
Yeah. That's why I have you.
I love firing people when it's performance related.
I don't like doing it ever. So that's why I have you.
Because if I've tried everything, and I believe honestly that I've done everything I can to set someone up for success, and they still weren't successful, that means they're not a good fit. And if they're not a good fit, I actually view it as doing them a favor. They're not going to see it that way most of the time in the moment. Most of the time when you fire people for performance, they don't say, oh, thank you. Although I've had a fair number who have, so that's kind of weird.
That's kind of weird.
But in the long term, you're doing them a service, because if they continue to struggle, if they continue to not perform well, they're not going to advance within your organization. They're not going to be happy. You're not going to be happy. So it's better to part company. And so you really have to get to that point where if you're willing to hire someone, you have to be willing to fire them. And that's ultimately how you deal with performance issues that you can't rectify through processes, training, coaching, mentoring, and all the other things that you need to try first.
And for all you listeners out there, I have already told Chip that the next time I need to fire somebody, he's doing it for me.
And I'm okay with that. As I've told you before, people pay me to travel places to fire people. So.
And I will do that because...
with you, I want a good meal in it for it too.
Deal.
Yeah.
100%.
All right. Well, before people fire us and unsubscribe from this podcast, I think it's time to bring this episode to a close, Ginny. Are you okay with that process?
I'm great with that process.
Excellent. Well, hopefully I get a positive performance review from you over the course of this episode. Maybe a positive performance review from the listeners too. Who knows? If you did like our performance, we'd love it if you'd leave a positive review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And with that, we're going to sign off. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Jenny Dietrich.
And it depends. Thank you for listening to the Agency Leadership Podcast. You can watch or listen to every episode by visiting agencyleadershippodcast.com or subscribing on your favorite podcast player. We would also love it if you would leave a rating or review at iTunes or wherever you go to find podcasts. Be sure to check out Ginny Dietrich at spinsucks.com and join the SpinSucks community at spinsucks.com/spin-sucks-community. You can learn more about me, Chip Griffin, at small-agency-growth.com, where you can also sign up for a free community membership to engage with other agency leaders. The Agency Leadership Podcast is distributed on the FIR Podcast Network, where you can find lots of other communications-oriented podcasts. Just visit www.firpodcastnetwork.com. We welcome your feedback and suggestions and look forward to being back with you again next week.